Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? Oh, there was actually a response. I wasn't expecting that. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to join me. I could smell barbecue food as I was walking over, so for taking the time to actually spend between the 12:15, 1 o'clock time when hunger's setting in it means a lot. It means a lot. So my name's Josh Willows, Head of Corporate Sales at Broadbean. Don't worry, not here to sell you on any products, sell you on. God, I'm not doing a good job. But I am here to sell you on a concept. So what I want to talk to you today about is social advocacy, why I'm a big believer of it in terms of the recruitment strategy. So we're going to focus on a couple of things, but most importantly, what is social advocacy and why is it important? And then how can you start incentivizing your employees and making it easy for them to start talking about your brand, talking about your jobs, and really leverage them, okay? So as a bit of a context part to start with, so the world around us is changing and social advocacy is always becoming more and more important as time goes on. So kind of gone are the days where you'd go and look on teletext for the best deals on holidays. We'll read hundreds of TripAdvisor reviews. I won't go to any restaurant unless it's at least got 4 stars. If we're going to look for jobs, there's places like Glassdoor is obviously going from strength to strength. And with products as well, we're looking at things like Trustpilot. We want to understand what we're buying and what the average person has to think. So whether we're looking at restaurants to eat at, hotels to stay at, products to buy, we are obsessed with what the common person thinks. And jobs aren't any different. So as like a show of hands, does anyone recognize anyone on the screen right now? Couple of people, cool. So this is one of the new kind of fads, I guess, that's coming out, and it's a sign of the day and age and the times that we're in. So these people are often referred to as like Instagram influencers. So between them, they have around about 100 million followers. So to put that into context, that's like 1.5 times the population of the UK. Their only real job description in terms of what they do is personality. They're an internet personality, which I don't even know what that means. It seems to be a coincidence all of them are reasonably good looking as well, but I'm not going to read too much into that, right? So the day and age that we live in, we're far more likely, if you think about the kind of people you follow on Twitter, on Facebook, all those different areas, we're much more drawn, it's like a magnet to go towards people rather than necessarily just brands or companies, right? But talking about a brand and a company and someone who markets himself really well, I just want to talk through an example of what I think is a great illustration of how your brand is only as valuable as how it is perceived to be. So this is a brand called Supreme. The more trendy of us, definitely not me, might be familiar with them and some of the stuff that they do. But they're a really interesting company. So it's a skating fashion brand, started in 1994. And they're now one of the biggest kind of fashion retailers in terms of their exclusivity. And also, as well, the amount of revenue they're generating. So for anyone who wants to kind of geek out in terms of their content marketing, they do some great stuff. Actually, all of the website traffic that they get is through their own SEO. So anyway, one of the things that they did that was kind of interesting is they're very good at exclusivity, right? And harnessing the fact that they never really, or they constantly understock. And what that means is people become obsessed in getting hold of all of their products. Now, the one thing that wouldn't necessarily have worked, and the way that they actually infiltrated this market, is by getting kind of the popular kids to wear their T-shirts, wear their clothes. It wouldn't really work if like a kind of loser walked into school one day wearing their shirt and no one really cared. But when they see the popular kids wearing them, the first thing they want to do is get hold of it. And then the next thing they do is realize they can't because it's always out of stock. Now, this has led to some really interesting kind of ideas and behavior. My favorite one is they managed to just sell a brick with their logo on. So it was going at £30. But what happens is people snap all of these up and then resell them. So the idea is, and to kind of link this back into recruitment, is often we always don't have huge salaries to play with. I saw Neil's talk this morning when looking at candidate data and how salary is such a big driver. When we don't have some of those things to work with, the thing that we have to sell is our culture and sell our brand. And that's where you're able to create this kind of powerful momentum for your recruitment strategy. So that's just some kind of general setting the scene. What I also wanted to do is give you loads of facts, because I know this is kind of the stuff that you want to go away and show to the powers that be your end on why social recruiting is so great. So I've got loads of them here, but we've got, so 84% of consumers value recommendations. So think about how much more you'll take the opinion of someone you went to school with or a family member over a brand just telling you that they're really, really good. Leads developed for employee social marketing convert 7 times more frequently. So again, if we're to put that into a recruitment space, imagine if you can get 7 times the amount of traffic on the content that you're sharing. Content shared by employees receives 8 times more engagement than contents just shared by the brand. Messages shared by employees, 561% further. 79% of firms surveyed reported more online visibility. And from, I guess, the holy grail when anyone ever talks about recruitment these days and social media, but LinkedIn in that sphere, even LinkedIn themselves acknowledge employee shares have double the click-through rates of corporate shares. So I think that's really interesting, given all that data, how underused the employee is as kind of like an advertising tool. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how can you start leveraging them as almost like an advertising channel, right? But I understand there is also challenges around this. Now, if I could summarize one barrier to social advocacy, I think it's trust. So if you look at the data behind, so we interviewed 155 different HR directors to ask them about all of their thoughts around social recruiting, employee referral, all of those different areas. Now, what's scary for me is only a third actually actively encourage their staff to post on social media. So if we actually dial that down, back and think about it, I'm struggling when you actually apply the logic to that to think what we're looking to achieve or what we're looking to gain out of it. Because, as I showed you at the beginning, we've got platforms like Glassdoor. We've got these different ways. So whether you like it or not, your employees have the ability to talk about you and your business. So the question is, are you going to try and help to mold that conversation, or are you going to kind of leave them to do that in an anonymous posting platform, right? So that's the first part. Second part, in terms of employer brand, I can only really think of 2 different scenarios, right? Either your employer brand is completely wrong and it doesn't align to what your employees' view of your company and your culture is, and therefore the 2 aren't going to marry up, in which case when candidates come into your business, they're just going to have false expectations about what there is. Or secondly, you work in a company that's so terrible that people are only going to be writing negative things, in which case there's a room full of recruiters, so maybe see if you can get yourself a different job, right? Life's too short. But what I think we do have is such a powerful way of being able to use them to use employees in a positive way. So a little bit of context, really, really good book that I would advise, not just looking in terms of social advocacy, if you ever manage people or you want to kind of just look into the psyche of how we work. So it's a book called The Power of Moments. So I'll give you an example of some of the things that they talk about. Put your hand up. Have you ever been to a theme park during the school holidays? Just put your hand up if you have. Cool, so most of you should know what I'm talking about, right? Really think about it. 95% of the time that you're in that theme park is terrible. There's long queues, you've driven, you've taken an hour to park, there's kids with too much sugar. But what do you think about when you think about the theme park? You think about the first time you rode on Space Mountain or Oblivion at Alton Towers, wherever it might be. That's the power of moments, right? So little small moments give us the ability or have so much more staying power than all the other negative parts, right? So what I'm talking about that is often your employees can be so much more of an interesting vehicle to get your message out than a brand itself. So we're always restricted by brand guidelines and getting the right corporate messaging out. Just let your employees do the work, and they'll often think it's like crowdsourcing your marketing and your employer brand. So many examples. Best if you just want to see great examples, and often a lot of this is in terms of customer service. Ritz-Carlton hotels are great at this. But it all kind of goes down and boils down to that word of trust. So what Ritz-Carlton do is they give their employees the ability to spend $2,500 on keeping their guests happy. So they have the trust to be able to spend that however they will. So this is a great example. I've got loads of them. But a family was staying at a hotel, and one of their children lost their Thomas the Tank Engine toy. So the child was obviously very upset about it. So not only did they go out and buy him the exact replica of the one that he lost, but they did a full photo shoot of him enjoying the life out in the desert, and built that memory. They even wrote a handwritten letter in the words of Thomas the Tank Engine as well to take to that child. And going the extra mile, so this is, again, we're talking about it right now. You think about that as an advertising campaign, the goodwill that actually builds. And there's so much power in it. This is the other thing, right? Everyone's always so worried about social media being a negative. But let's be honest, all of us talk about our lives. Like if you ask my friends what they think I do in my job, they think I'm like Wolf of Wall Street, going around, cocktail bars at events, all that kind of stuff. They don't see us like at the stand first in the morning lining up jelly beans and pens to make sure that they're in the right place, or walking into the office to 500 emails, right? The image that we want everyone to think that we're doing well. And therefore, social media as a platform is just such a great way to be able to actually leverage positive messaging rather than negative. But there's a trust in it. Other part is, as well, this is kind of like an N=1 study, but I started doing my own, I guess, personal research into what kind of content works. I thought, you know what, this is going to be great. I'm going to start like posting really good industry articles that everyone here is going to want to read about all the time on LinkedIn. And I realize you're probably all signed up to newsletters, you've got your own Google alerts, and I got probably the odd 5 or 6 clicks on all of it. So I thought that was a really interesting kind of development. I thought that was kind of how you would use LinkedIn. So about halfway through the year last year, I just kind of switched around and started doing more of my content of day-to-day life when I thought there was interesting things happening in the office. And you can see the amount of engagement and different things that you get from it actually was much more positive than the industry articles. It's nothing to do with my job, just walking around wearing sunglasses or whatever it might be. But I thought that was a really interesting place. And if you think about Broadbean, for example, I think a lot of people have said to me that this is much more interesting in finding out what the company is like to work for than going onto our corporate careers page and seeing some jobs listed and a few photos of kind of the team out or whatever it might be. This was actually, I thought it should be an interesting one. This was actually my most engaged post of last year, which is our Christmas desk competition that we take, as you can see, very seriously. We take it so seriously that we actually finished second, and that was our desk. We had another team who like handcrafted the Coca-Cola lorry out of cardboard boxes. It was a good effort. So I'm still a bit bitter about it, but I'm just about over it now in May this year. So those are just, like I say, if you give your employees the flexibility, that wouldn't have worked if I was scared that there was some sign of corporate, I was going to get reprimanded for sharing what the life is like, right? It's all about giving the freedom. So hopefully now you understand that social recruiting is a good idea and social advocacy as well is a good idea. So we've got to try and get this, though, into the frame of recruitment and how we can actually start converting this into hires, into interviews, so on and so forth. So the way I look at it, and the closest kind of synergy between the two is referral, right? But referral is kind of the oldest trick in the book. It's existed since recruitment's existed. And for so many businesses, it's all about, okay, so I'm Josh and I've known this person who I've worked with in the past, so I can vouch for them, bring them in. 6 months down the line, I might get a referral fee, right? And what I want to do is actually move to more of a kind of treating your employees as an advertising channel. So I'll give you an example as well. So it's a bit of a strange analogy. Is everyone familiar with bloodletting? Have you ever heard about this? It used to be a medical practice. Don't worry, there is a link. I'll just give you a second to explain. So bloodletting used to be, right, for about 1,000 years, it was one of the most common ways of treating people. What happened? I'll come in, I'm really, really sick. And the doctor would go, I know what we've got to do. It's your blood. Your blood's infected, so we're going to draw out loads of your blood, and that will clear the infection. Now, we know that's a terrible idea nowadays, right, to do to someone that is sick. But there's two outcomes. Either I died, and then it was, well, do you know, he was sick anyway, he was always going to go. Or I got better, and then they would actually say, well, it was the bloodletting that did it. The example I'm going to say is that's kind of how most businesses over the last 30 years have treated their referral strategy, right? So they've looked at their referral strategy, and they've gone, referral's not working. What do we do at the moment? Well, we pay a referral fee. I know what we'll do. We'll just make the referral fee a bit higher. We won't try anything else. We'll add an extra £500. Everyone's always going to be motivated. So what I'm trying to do is take a step back from that, actually think, is the way that we're currently paying referral schemes actually motivating for employees, and is there a different way to do it? Okay? So I said about using your employees as an advertising channel, so I just want to give you a little bit of a context, right? The average person has 400 social and professional connections. So if you take the size of your business, times it by 400, that's the passive candidate database reach that you have. Now, if you think about it, your employees have already done the hard work, right? They've already made friends over the whole of their life. They've connected with them on social media. They're there and they're sitting there. The question is, how much of that are you actually going to leverage? Now, I was talking about referral fees, and I think for a lot of people, referral fees are great when they come in. I've had examples where I've done it in the past, right? But you're asking your employees to go through that kind of long-term thinking. They've got to wait for someone to go through a hiring process. Often they've got to pass probation. We know how long hiring processes we can take. We know how long probation can take. It can take 6-9 months at times to be able to even get that fee. And we live in a society now, right, of instant gratification. So what happens if you maybe instead flip that round and start actually treating your employees as an advertising channel? So we looked at it and we thought, well, how about if we took a whole recruitment funnel, right? Because let's think about it. If they're actually sharing content, they're doing something to contribute towards your brand, right? Is it actually their fault? If they've got you a candidate that's good enough to go through to interview, in a lot of people's minds, that's a really good quality candidate, but it's out of their control whether you choose to hire them or they take a job offer somewhere else, but the employer's done the work. So what you've got to do with this is think about how important each one of these stages are for you. You could configure this in a million different ways, right? But the important thing is that subtle move of moving to use your employees as an advertising channel. So we've had examples where we worked businesses in this in the past, right? And what we did was a kind of points means prizes kind of mentality of actually, again, letting the employees choose how they want to be rewarded. So maybe some people might be more excited if you said 1,000 points equals £10, they might just want to keep collecting £10 Amazon vouchers. And maybe that's a way of motivating them. Or they might want to save up and get a bigger prize. Now, the next thing I always get is businesses saying, oh, I don't have money and I've got to convince the company or whatever it might be. For a lot of employees, even if you were able to just give them recognition or things in your control, duvet days, I saw that in the presentation earlier, duvet days might be an example, an extra hour at lunch, a team lunch, whatever it might be. Think about what's in your control. My personal favorite, because I do think as well, you don't want to necessarily just solely bribe your employees, but I think the giving and donations to charity works really well. Like a lot of businesses today are affiliated to charities. It's really good for your corporate responsibility. It provides like a sense of meaning in the business. So even just taking some of those points and putting that as a donation towards charity, just a different way of looking at things. But the final thing, I probably can't stress this enough as well, is you've got to start working with your employees in the way that they're used to working with social media, right? So I have so many businesses that I speak to and they might send out an email or a newsletter or whatever it might be. But you've got to kind of deliver it to employees and give it in a way that they're able to easily share that out. So if you think today how much time you really spend on places like Facebook, places like Twitter, on your desktop, that's always going down year on year, but mobile's always increasing. Similarly, if you think about even how, if you want to take that one-on-one referral, if you think about how you communicate with your friends, I don't know how many of us sit there and type out emails, messaging to each other, or write a letter. We WhatsApp, we SMS, right? So make sure, at the very least, you can get your links to your jobs, whatever it might be, in a platform that's just easy for them to deliver, easy to share. So in terms of social advocacy in the presentation today, if you take away 3 things, my 3 kind of summary points are, give your employees a voice. So I'm going to underline that in terms of trust. Just question, don't go fall into the trap of closed-loop thinking. Think about how you incentivize your employees, right? Your IT department is going to be completely different to your sales departments. Don't do a one-size-fits-all. Think about how they're incentivizing when they're engaged in the platform, and keep it simple, okay? Don't go with really long-winded, antiquated processes. The more simple you make it for the employees, the easier it is to share. Perfect. So that's everything I wanted to go through today. As I said, my name's Josh. Probably got time for 1 or 2 questions if there are any.